So up in the studio, yeah, last time, when was the last time we saw each other? Was it in Galveston?
It was in Galveston. That was last time. Yeah.
So long
Which
ago.
I don't know. That's probably like 8 years ago.
No, no, it wasn't. It wasn't. I was thinking about it and I was like, no, it was not. It was in 2015 when I did the project at Project Row Houses.
Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. When you had your boys with you, and then we did the sign painting. Yeah. So
Yeah.
okay. So 2015. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, 2015. I'm trying to think. Yeah. So then last summer, oh my gosh, you know what? Okay, so you know about one project that I started actually at Galveston that I like literally just finished last week.
Oh, okay. Good. Uh-huh.
Is no, it's this other one connected, which is I'll show you the screen. Um no, not that. Let's see. Can you see my screen? Okay, good. Just gonna make it bigger. It's not that. Okay. So do you remember these? The full screen.
I'm now the kitchen.
The Tawaf series. Is
Okay.
that the name of it?
That's the 12 study series. So yeah, so this series it has 3 variations to it, and it's a series of 36 text paintings, and it's 12 texts from Ali Shariat's book Hajj, and it's done in 3 variations. Let's see, 1, 2. Well, you can see 3 there, right? And so I just finished that a long time. That thing has gone through lots of residencies and everything. And there's been other projects that I've done in between, of course, but started and finished in between. But I just finished that project like last week. So glad about that. I'm actually thinking, I want to say finish because I still have some stuff to do with it. Like there's a couple of pieces like Cairo's very dusty, which I realized Cairo's very dusty, and I ended up having to try to like clean some of the paintings because of crazy dust and what have you. And I'm thinking of actually mounting these are on paper, of mounting them on canvas.
The canvas.
Yeah.
Can I see a close up? Can I see a close up on one of them?
Yeah. So actually, this is where I will see. I'll turn to see if I can control these cameras. I'm going to see if maybe I can show you. I'll turn off this sound here. Sound. Okay, let's try this thing out. I'm gonna turn on the camera in let's see if that'll work. Oh, I would have to stop this screen share. Pause share. Stop the share. Okay. I'm in my studio, and can you? Okay, so question: Can you see me on my? Yeah, you can see on my other screen. Let's see if I can. Oh, I'm gonna switch the camera view. All right, so here I am. Oh, this is funny because it's like you see these different views. So now we're in my studio. I'll give you a close up. Okay, can you see that?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All
And
right.
they're what? They're acrylic or they oil?
Yes.
What's the?
They're oil.
They're oil.
They're
Okay.
oil, like oil stick.
Okay.
Yeah, oil stick. And then I'll show you one that I just recently, the one that's like my most recent one that I finished. It's this one. So they are like variations of white and black, and then white and like this one. Can you see that? That one is more like a white, a black with it's actually olive oil. So it's like this overlaying of text. And in this part of Ali Shariati, it's from Ali Shariati's book, this book here. Called Hajj, right? Are you familiar with him, with Ali Shariati? I mean, I've probably told
I'm
you that
not.
before.
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So he has this book. Ali Shariati was a man who lived in Iran. He's an Iranian sociologist, and sort of religious scholar as well from the 60s. He died in the 60s. And what attracted me to his writing was actually, I was doing this series on, I'll turn back to myself. Okay. Yeah, so I was doing this series. Did I start it in Galveston? I think I did. I did start in Galveston. A series called Ritual and Revolution. Anyway, so in this series, then I was looking. I think it didn't actually start as being called. The project was actually Last Right. So Last Right
That was the
was a
last one.
project. Yes, that one. So okay.
With Malcolm's burial.
Yeah, exactly. All right, here I am back.
Ritual and Revolution.
Ritual Revolution. And so that project, I was looking at, I'll show you. We'll go back to this, the screen share, resume share. There, can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't hear you.
Oh, yes, I can see it.
Yeah, so that project, I was looking at, I was still doing some research about Malcolm X and his, I was thinking about his pilgrimage to Mecca and also his funeral. Like, it was such a short period of time, it literally took place within the span of less than a year, right? So
wow, okay.
Right? In that process, then I was looking at the pilgrimage ritual. So oh my gosh, I had gone to the Schomburg Center and I was doing some research and I got his journals and I was doing some work with his journals. And then I was also just sort of thinking about the rituals, like what exactly was, like, from the standpoint of a memoir, but then I was his memoir, his journal. And then in the process of just like looking for a book, like just strictly about the rituals, like how to do the rituals, what are the rituals for Hajj, then I stumbled upon Ali Shariati's book. And in his book, then Ali Shariati, Ali Shariati, he goes through, like, it was literally like sort of like an Amazon search, Hajj, rituals.
Mm.
And if you do, for me, that was like one of the first things that came up. There weren't, I'm sure there are books that, that talk about the rituals, but actually I found to be quite a few books from like people's experiences, and Ali Shariati's book is about the rituals, but even deeper than that, he's really going into the symbolism of the rituals. And he has this whole sort of social justice angle on it. He's actually Shia. So he's writing during the Iranian Revolution. And so he's writing about, and like lots of his sort of, I say that right, of writing has to do with this idea of alienation. It has to do with decolonization. And he's talking about that from like a spiritual, religious standpoint, and also using like the symbolism of the Hajj. So sort of pairing, so it kind of like jumped off from me, like just looking at like Malcolm X and his journal, to then finding a book that, yes, talks about the rituals, but talks about it from a very specific socio-political and even astronomical, cosmological.
Wow.
You know? So you get into like the Hajj, right? And I guess when I think about what really pulled me into the work is like, yes, I love form, I love formalities, and I love, rituals, and I love, symbolism, but I love it also with some sort of like performative or embodied sense. I mean, I think that's so much like what Islam is about, right? Like you have rituals, yes, you have rituals, yes, you have form, but even more sort of, I don't say more important than maybe more important than the form is that the form is just a body for these, for this sort of connection, so you need your body, right? Like if you don't have your body, you're not on earth, right? You like literally when you run out of use of your body, then, you're buried, right? So you need to perform the rituals, and the rituals are very specific in how you do them, right? So the circle for the Tawaf, the running back and forth for the Sa'i, but you also within that, then there's things that you're supposed to learn. There's like states that you're supposed to sort of go through and sort of ascend through, like spiritually, right? And then there's this whole aspect of people gathering together. And Ali Shariati, he talks about it as like a conference, like a global conference of people from all over the world, and what you're supposed to get from it. And there was one thing I remember when I was in Houston, when I was doing my residency in Galveston, there was a gathering with some of the sisters there. And one of the sisters had just come back from Hajj. I don't remember her name. She wasn't like, one of like the core group of like Tamika, Malika, or Shadisa, or some of the others around.
Was it Sister Sakina?
I wonder, was it? Do you think she would have made Hajj like around 2012?
Oh, no, not that early, I don't think.
But
I don't think that early. Yeah.
Particular sister, the way she was talking about the Hajj, she was so, she's an African-American sister. She was so like visual, like it was so visual to me the way she spoke about it. And she was so it's like she had stories, she was like, she's so close to like the Kaaba, and like you want to touch it, and then like you're right there, and then next thing you know, like you're pulled away from it, and it's like this whole, like you're so close, like all these things that kind of happen there, and it was just kind of like, I was just really sort of thinking about like this sort of thing of like, people in their bodies and doing this ritual. And then, and Shariati, there's always, I guess there's always like this of course there's always personal things when we do our work, I would say, at least, for myself. But Shariati, he talks about the Hajj as this sort of performative ritual that is about Hajjar.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah.
As this Black woman who was, in a sort of, in a societal sense, like in a more lowly kind of state, in a societal sense, but who was so elevated, and that we're performing her ritual. We're basically performing what she did. She ran between, we're running just in her footsteps. And Malcolm X, there was a piece I did when I was in Galveston. It was at the final exhibition for the residency, where I had traced Malcolm X's handwriting. And he says, where Hajjar's feet tread thousands of years earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this is something he just wrote in his, journal, just about this ritual of the Sa'i. And I just love the way how he just connected it back to, you know, like you can connect the ritual back to like a specific person. Like, you know, it's not
Right.
about like, and I think that's something that's so much in you know, Islam, right? Like whether it's like a rituals that everybody does, or like into Tawaf or anything, that you have to be connected to a person, you know, like you're not, it's
Mhm.
not just about like, you know, picking up a book and finding a manual, you know, nor is like the revelation of the Quran just like pick, you know, like a book that was just sent, that was sent down through a person to give you an example of, you know, how to do it. And
Yeah.
so, I really love that too, that, you know, just sort of connecting that. And I think a lot of times people don't really talk about like this ritual as like, this is Hajjar, like this is ritual is about following her in her footsteps. People talk so much about like Ibrahim alayhi salam with, you know, with the ritual, but you know, you think it was like, who was the one who ran between two mountains? Like, why are we running?
That's very true. That's very true.
Who's-
So I just, you know, finished, I mean, just finished, but like maybe a couple of weeks ago, finished the Blauware, Africa and the Quran class or workshop or whatever you would want to call it. And, you know, that was one of the things, is just like how those stories, which were, you know, relate to African people, you know, in the book are marginalized and often, you know, forgotten, but they're there. You know, it's not like they're erased. It's like the way that that subject matter is talked about, they are not prioritized. You
Yes.
know, and then so therefore we have you know, we have this maybe perhaps lack of we could have a stronger identification with these texts, and you know, and with these stories than we do, you know, for several reasons. But it's interesting too, though, you know, something that you mentioned with the that you wanted within the work, you know, the issue of performance, right? And this is something that I have been, you know, dealing with also a little bit, you know, particularly with my drawings, or thinking about it through the drawings, especially, is that like the performative act does leave some kind of trace of energy on the document.
Yes.
You know, it does imbue it. It does imbue it with some kind of, you know, presence or yeah, just some type of energy or value. And so the reason why I was interested in that is, and I'm wondering, you know, are you thinking about this as well? Is that this is one of, when you think about the Black American experience, this is one of the areas that we've made major contributions into, you know, in terms of the aesthetics of it, in terms of the, yeah, just the dynamics of it, of performance. We've left such an impeccable mark on it that I'm wondering, are we trying to get that kind of same energy and place it into, you know, the visual arts?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, huh. Okay, so let me just see if I'm getting um what you're saying. This sort of thing of wanting the work to have like a trace of performance, have to do with performance, or even if it's not performance. Is that kind of
Right. Even I think there's something. Yeah, I think that there is something in. Well, I definitely, like, for me, with things that you talked about ritual, but like when you come to things. So if you think about the prayer rug, right?
yeah.
Um, you come to the prayer rug at least 5 times a day. Sometimes we, you know, if not more. You keep these rugs for years and years. It's a place of where, you know, you've spent a lot of time, and you had this accumulated, you know, set of experiences in it, and I think it adds something to the material.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I'm wondering too if like that's kind of what we're wanting, we're seeking by adding certain performative elements to these 2D works. Because I don't see you performing. You know, there's evidence of it, you know, through this layering and kind of you know, the surface of the work, but I don't see that.
Right.
You know, that's no, that part. Your performance is an invisible part of the work.
Yeah, you know, that's
Yeah.
the thing, because I feel like, yeah, the work is, of course, it's a 2D work. Oh, if Crystal asked again, I decided what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna record the screen, it's bootleg, but I'm gonna record the screen live in the, let's see how it goes. I'm just record the screen, make it alive. So she can kind of,
Okay.
and I can see people in it if they're, you know, watching. They'll be able to hear. I have my headphones. So,
Okay.
anyway. No, but I think that there's a thing, this is kind of like, it's almost like this desire when I think of it, like for the text to perform on the page, like for the text to have movement, like for this in a sense, for the text to have movement, and for it's about a thing that is a performance. Like I don't want to say, you know what's weird? I was going to say, I don't want to say performing a ritual, but we literally say that. Like we say, I'm going to perform salat. I'm going to perform the hajj. You know what I'm saying? Like we use this kind of language around rituals. You know, we do use this sort of language around rituals. And so in a sense, in thinking about an artwork, for me, making an artwork that, you know, is about a ritual, then I feel like the language of performance is there, you know, like in a sense, like I wanted the text to be like to do what the ritual does, you know, like in the ritual of Tawaf, then you're going around in 7 circles. I wanted the text to go around in 7 circles, you know, and in the ritual of this, like you're running back and forth in 7 lines, but you're going first, you're going would that be, I don't know if that's like east or west, but first, you know, you're going one direction, then you turn around and come back. So the text is more, you can see a little bit better. Oh yeah, like in let's say this one, that
Okay.
have the text is going one way and then it comes back the other way. Like how you would if you were running, you would have to like turn right back around, you know? And so,
that's nice. Yeah.
So that idea of performing, that a person would have to use their almost like watching a performance, you know, like you have to, your eyes have to do certain things, you know, like your eyes have to follow the text in a particular way. I want to say like if you're watching a sport, but like if you were watching people in pilgrimage, like there's very specific movements that we associate with it, you know, there's very specific forms that you associate with people's bodies and the way how people's bodies are using, you know, are using the space, right? When they are doing this particular ritual. And you know what?
I also get a certain density from it too. You know, just the way that all those people are brought together within that space.
Yeah.
You know, that I do feel that from the pieces as well.
Yeah, and you know, there was a time when I first started with the project, I was thinking like, oh, am I going to make this something that you know, I was thinking, did I want to make this something that was because it's with text, right? So there's so many ways you can approach text, right? You can approach it as a print, right? Or you could approach it as a you know, anything. You could just do a graphic that's like with you know, on your computer, whatever. There's a lot of different options that you have. But I kind of came to the idea of paint because there's this sort of like messiness of using like a stencil with oil, you know, like you can't really contain it.
Yeah.
You can only contain it so much. So you get like fingerprints and you do get, it's kind of what you were talking about, you know, like you mentioned this thing of like your personal interaction with the work, when you're making it?
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's right.
Do you feel like that's something that you are able to like I guess sort of translate it like, do you feel like that like it translates, or is it something that you necessarily want for the viewer to feel this idea of performance, or feel like this sentiment that there was this performance kind of element, or does that really matter? Yeah.
I do. I do. And I'll tell you what, really started me with these things is that, shoot. Okay. I'll say that, but I want to ask you about scale too after this,
Oh, for sure, yeah.
about these pieces and their scale. So we'll go back to that. But, so we had the Manil collection here in Houston, and when I was younger, probably like this is my late teens, early 20s, I used to go to the Manil a lot, and and that was also a time that I really started trying to really learn a lot about African art. I got pretty good at it. I mean, so I had this teacher named Dr. Alvin Wardlaw, who I had studied with, and I could recognize, different sculptures that come from different places, and like I had kind of trained my eye. I've lost it now a little bit, or maybe a lot of it, but
You can tell like which part of Africa a particular sculpture came from?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that in some of the sculptures, and particularly if I remember correctly, they were Dogon, and some, yeah, mainly Dogon sculptures. They would make these libations. They would pour these offerings onto them, right? And they would do it so much to where it starts to change the form of the original sculpture.
Yeah.
Because the materials that they pour it onto, it dries and it starts to change. And there was something about that I don't know. It was just something about that I was really taken by, and just the sense of time that was also that you could get from this, right? And this is something that also later on picked up from Terry as well.
Yes.
The idea about time and accumulation, and what that can express to the viewer. So yes, ideally I'd like to. I that is something that I strive for. I don't always hit. I don't always hit it, of course, but yeah, I mean, and that's something I can see in these works as well. And I was wondering, because of that, how would you feel about, a larger shift in scale? Because it then takes another layer of engagement with it in order to make that shift in scale successful, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like I have been asked that many times about scale, because these are all they're all 22.5 by 22.5. There's a thing for me that there's the number of them. So I felt like, because there's this repetitive thing that's happening, they're all being repeated. Each piece is being repeated at least 3 times. It's being done in 3 different ways. So like to be able to see them all like once they're all done, which is pretty much
yeah.
Then there's a scale to the accumulation, to the actual number of them, so that for me just kind of became like satisfying enough in regards to scale. And then I guess, there's a thing for me too. I don't know, you go back and you're like, yes, why did I choose this size? Right? There's also, it is coming from a book, and there is something in me wanting to reference back that aspect of being able to kind of like be with it, and read not exactly like how you would a book, but somewhat. I mean, because it is more difficult to read
Yeah.
a little book, you know?
Yeah. No, I do like smaller works. Because, and not that this is small. I'm just saying, like, even, the size, smaller works, like about the size of a paperback book or something like that. It provides a certain intimacy, right? It allows you to get close in on it and kind of establishes this relationship. But I think with the larger pieces, I think if you were to do this at a larger piece, you really do get in to the realm of performance,
Yeah.
especially at the amount of material that you have placed on these. The amount of mark making and layering of text, you really do get into the issue of performance. Yeah.
It's so interesting because, you mentioned the thing about performance and like Terry, and I think that there is like, I love that there's this sort of like belief in a sense that like your sort of interaction with the material, it and your sort of intentionality of how you interact with the material, for myself as well, like that there's something you wanting to sort of transfer over into it, like I don't know, I guess that does have something to do with a personal, I don't know, and I wonder how you feel about this, but like, a sort of personal, I would say kind of relationship to how you make your work. I feel like it has so much to do with that. Yeah, like there is something that like in making work that there, it's like something you want to create, but there's something you also want to get from it too, like in the process.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know if
mhm.
don't know. I mean, how I want to say this? Like, for some people, yes, art making it can be a transformative process, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think people put a lot of hope into art, in terms of like thinking that it can change their lives, but on some level, it probably can change your life. You know what I'm saying? Like in regards to like how you engage with it and because it would be the same. It potentially is the same thing as like doing a weed or something, like something that you do every day and potentially has the capability of giving to you as much as you give to it.
Right. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You know what? I remember before this one artist here, Yusuf Chroma, you might be familiar with him. He's a poet. Well, he's from Philly, but like he was here in Egypt for a minute. Anyway, he's a poet, and he was saying something like, he's kind of mentioning just sort of hadith. There's a story that like I don't know if it was in the Prophet's Mosque, one of the mosques in the Prophet's Mosque, where they put up a memoir for the poet. Remember this?
Oh,
Remember this?
vaguely.
Yeah. And he sort of, and I asked him, after he was like telling the story, I had heard that story many times before, but I was like, is this sort of like, we always talk about like, it's very common language, like in the arts, right? Even for people who would probably say they don't believe in God, they don't believe in nothing or whatever, to use the word inspiration, right? Like this word, like inspiration. And so I have been thinking about this quite a bit, maybe over the past few years, right? Like I think I used to be able to make art like with music around and stuff, like with other stuff going on. And I'm not trying to say that I can't, but it's almost to the point that I cannot, right? And it's kind of I won't say it's kind of a shame, but it because sometimes I do just wanna, but it's like this idea of like somebody being, people say they're inspired when they see art, right? And then artists say that they're inspired to make art, right? But then there's also kind of like sort of inspiration like in the process. And then I wonder, like, I was asking him like what is that? Like, there's like different types of like revelation, right? There's like, of course, there's like this sort of holy book type of revelation, right, which we don't really have access to. And then there is the sort of revelation or inspiration, which like you talk about, let's say Moses' mom, like she was inspired to like put him in, to put him in the Nile. I think it was the Nile River, right? And we don't claim her to be like a prophet or anything like that, like she was, a righteous woman. But I've been so interested in that. Like, what is, so what is that for like average people, like what is that kind of sort of revelation or inspiration, And then I know for myself, like if I want to, I do put, I don't say I put hope in art. I do in a sense, I just know that I get good things from it, like I get good things from it, right?
Yeah.
Meaning that like if I want
things that you don't plan.
Yeah, things I don't get from like other processes. So like let's say if I want to and actually, I can't say like I love to make photographs on, sometimes and all that stuff. But I can't say that I get it from like the more mechanical arts, like photography, or like editing something, But if I'm drawing on a sheet of paper or I'm using paint, and like that very like direct engagement with material, then there's a certain kind of focus that I get that really just clears my head, and just like, if I just need to get grounded in a sense and like focus, then I do that. If I need to figure something out, then then I know that that's like a good way for me to be able to do so, and I feel like there is a certain sort of, so back to like what he was saying, about the poet, that there was a certain kind of like guidance or revelation that is through the artistic process, I believe.
No, I mean, I definitely believe in that. I mean, there's something. Oh gosh, I can't remember who said this. Was basically, that's kind of how we, not only I think not only within Islamic culture, but also within like Black American culture. That's kind of how I think often we've used our art forms, or that's been, that's been, I think at the kernel of it, to add to either protect ourselves or to teach ourselves or to raise our spiritual level in one way or the other. And I don't think that only happens with music. I think that happens with a lot of other forms as well, probably more folk forms, but
I don't, I guess to me it's so much when I think about it, I feel like there's different types of art, and it says like, even I think about myself and like the different types of art that I make, like there's like art that's very cerebral, and it's not, I don't know. That's the best way I can put it. There's art that's very cerebral, and then there's art that is like what you mentioned of like, with those sculptures and people sort of adding things to it, whether it's like material, and then thinking like this sculpture can actually carry, the weight of, basically it can carry the weight of these sort of rituals, whether people are aware of that like ritual that that took place with it or not, but that it's like, it's still, it's still there, it's still there, and that it's meant to carry it. And that, you know what, and I guess in a sense, that's what people do, sort of feel these things, right? Like people start to get these like energies from artworks, so yeah, that's
Yeah, no. So that class is actually very. I mean, I found a lot of interest in it. I'm talking about the Bilal class. And one of the things that got brought up in the class is the idea of the crossroads. I forget how it got brought up, but the crossroads is being the place where the horizontal and the vertical meet, right? The place where these two worlds meet,
yeah.
The physical world and the spiritual world. And I think maybe the ritual or maybe the artwork is also a kind of a crossroads.
That's super interesting. Okay.
Where you're trying to figure out. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to strip down. For some people, like you said, there are many different forms of art making, but one of the things is like maybe you're there and you're trying to strip away that layer, that primitive information from the other side, and so yeah. But I grew up in one of the reasons why it's really easy for me. I think sometimes it's easy for me to think about these things this way is I grew up as a Christian, right? And I grew up in a family of gospel musicians.
Yeah.
So I would see people, weekly, use art in order to, to reach some kind of spiritual, what's the word, like, I don't want to say position, but the idea of the Holy Ghost is like this kind of, spiritual transformation that happens. And they did that through art. They always did that through sound and music.
Yeah. That's so interesting you mentioned that, because I feel like I didn't used to understand what people would say. People would use that term, like, I don't know, praise and worship, right? I didn't grow up Christian, right? Of course, you know this. So,
yeah.
So I didn't really understand. I was like, y'all just sing it. And my mind was just like, y'all just sing it. Like I felt like people were just trying to get entertained. And maybe because I felt like Islam, like our sort of worship, at least the worship that I had been accustomed to growing up, was so like sober, I think clean the screen, was so sober and just so sort of like quiet. It seemed to me like for somebody to want to use sort of something that could be seen like entertainment within the context of like religion or within the context of worship seemed like if it seemed like they was just trying to have fun, and I didn't understand, and I didn't see that kind of role in. It just didn't really make sense to me so much. I think, well, until I would say that there's, then there's that other side to Islam, which is like Sufism, basically, where people engage in a lot of poetry. People do engage in a lot of people engage in a lot of poetry. People engage in a lot of using the voice and intonations. And I guess once you actually get around to the Islamic world, even something like Quranic recitation, like that's like a big, of course I'm here in Egypt, that's like a big thing, of people, people, and it's not even folks who are like particularly, I'm gonna say, it was not people who are like trying to make a career out of like religion, meaning like people who are not trying to be imams, they're not trying to be like, get any position or whatever, but they would, study to be, to learn all the different, kiraat, like the different recitations.
Oh, okay.
All the different styles. And then, of course, people develop their own styles, for reciting Quran. And all of this, and I've been studying Tajweed, and all of this has to do, well, I guess a lot of what you realize is that, of course, again, that thing with form, right? Like that there's like these certain, if you can sort of use a form really well, to sort of translate an idea, then you can get a lot. Basically, you could get a lot more out of it. Actually, you can. So if for instance, I've been studying with my Quran teacher Jessie for how old is Yusuf? About 2.5 years, right? First thing she teaches you is how to breathe, right? How to breathe, right? And so, because you learn, like, there's stopping points, there's points where you just had this recent joke. Well, it's kind of a joke, Quran joke, which is that, like, she's like, people, to the Fatiha, right? At the end, it's 6 counts after the dod, right? And, and then so it's a dod, aleph, a long aleph, and then there's a shadda over the lam, right? And so she said people used to, so it's 6 counts. You have to hold that aleph for 6 counts, right? So like my imam, he was in Brooklyn, well, it's so funny. I always want to say they're African American, like the imams from Brooklyn, but this particular mosque in Brooklyn, I'm not sure if you've ever visited Masjid Musi Khalifa. It is part of Wardi Muhammad's community.
I don't think so.
That like Malcolm X talks about in his autobiography, that was really the Caribbean mosque. It's a very Afro-Caribbean mosque. It's like all like this, like since the 60s, right? So I want to say he's African American, but really he's actually from the Caribbean. Just been there for a long time, Black. And so he recites in a very sort of like beautiful way. I love the way he recites, and even when I recite here, I still think about him. So anyway, you go, Waladali, right? And she said people used to think that like you're ending it off with like a wink, like bye-bye, sort of Fatiha, like, like just making it, we love Fatiha, bye-bye, But she's like, no, it's a rule. It's a rule that you have to hold that
to do it
for 6 counts.
Yeah, extend it for that, yeah.
Yes, and there's times where you have
the law.
Yes, yeah, the dod, and then because the aleph is followed by a letter with a shadda on it, so you have to hold it for 6 counts. So there's all these kinds of, and I think that's probably for me one of the things that I love so much in like this sort of kind of a mix for myself, like between like conceptual and then art, and then also something that's very, also that's very kind of experiential as well, and making my own work, is that like there are particularities, right? So it's like, no, I'm not just gonna, let's say with these pieces, like I'm not just gonna put text anywhere, like I had to think where text belong, But then there's also like there's a person, there's a person in the work. I don't, and I always wonder about those artists who, always wonder, but this sort of thing in art where it almost seemed like there was like this sort of desire where it's like in the 60s to sort of take out the sort of spiritual element from art, from like minimal art, from those, Barnett Newman paintings, from those, Mondrian's, from all these, from these paintings that you would say that they look so formal, but that's not really the way how the artists were talking about their work. That's not the way what they were saying about their work. I mean, when you get to like Frank Stella, which I'm also curious about some of his stuff too, and there were some ideas that he had in his work that I started to think about a lot in my work too, his ideas of the variations. You know, he has that irregular polygon series, which I love, and he does these variations on each paintings that I started to think about in my own work of like doing these sort of variations. But you know, when people are like, oh no, the work is just this, I don't want you to sort of think like past this. And so I'm like, why are they trying to avoid that? Like, that's not real.
No, I mean, so I was listening to Fresh Air yesterday, and the guy who they were interviewing had just, oh shoot, he just wrote this novel, American Indian writer. I think that it's called Letting Go of the World or something like that. But he was talking about how the art industry, right, there's a pressure that is placed on artists by the art industry in order to fit a particular box.
Yeah.
I'm saying, and for their work to be very cut and dried, you know, like in regards to what it's about. And so they may not, you know, give us room to be people who have ideas about formalism and who have ideas about, you know, issues outside of the Black experience or the woman experience or the Islamic experience, you know. But I think we have to connect ourselves with people who are able to do that. Right. You know what I'm saying? Who are able to bring that kind of eye to the work. Me personally, I don't always think about my work in that. I don't want to say, of course I think about it in that way, but it is not, I don't think that has priority in my work.
What,
right? And
my priority?
I want to say that the formal issues about form. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say that either because that may not exactly be correct. But you know how certain artists will really systematically think through that aspect of what they're making, right? That's not my approach to it. I mean, I think it's a much more like I just kind of, I am attracted to certain materials and to certain processes, and then whatever, you know, when I'm making comes out of that. Yeah.
You know, that's so interesting because I feel like for me, it's like all these things that in a sense I have like a very big like experimentation phase in my work, like where I'm literally could be experimenting with something for years, honestly. Like I would say, like, and it's always like, it's the thing that's like, I remember Terry was talking about this before. He was like, the thing like when you're in your studio and you are making a work, but then there's like this peripheral work, you know, there's like this work that's just sort of, and I love that. I feel like there's like a work that's sort of brewing over at the side that you can just sort of like, you know, like maybe you're collecting ideas for it. Maybe some days you stick something on it, maybe something, and then like that becomes maybe like the next project. And it's like, but there's something, so I feel like even when I look at this project, oh man, I just the other day, I don't know if I'm supposed to keep these. I don't know. I used to keep these notebooks, right? So I usually I always have like these notebooks, and I would say definitely, especially back, oh my gosh, back when I was like at Penn, like they were all the same size even. They were all the same size, these little notebooks, and they were like a leather cover, and they were like, you know, these sketchbooks, and so I would sort of sketch things in there, but then also like my studio, the part of the purpose for my studio was to be able to like have things up on the wall and collect ideas, and then to be able to like come back and see things together over and over again, right? And so like, but in the notebook, that would be where I would more so like refine like technical things, like very specific things about like form. And so that would be my notebook, right? And so when I even look at this project, I have been for maybe about, I'm trying to think, maybe it was just like 2 years, sort of like, you know, doing some drawing stuff that would be like on my wall in the studio, but then like doing some things in like this sketchbook, notebook. And then I'd experiment with some, you know, some ideas. Maybe I thought it was gonna be like a print, you know, but then I realized, but then maybe I saw something, whether it was like an artwork or artist talk, and they were talking about material, like using a material. And so like I had never used paint before the series, you know, I never used paint. And so for me, it's like this sort of funny thing of like, I am not a painter, but I am using paint. Like that would be me, like I'm not a painter, I'm just using paint, right?
Yeah.
So there, but I would say, I could say I own that I paint, or maybe I'm a painter sometimes, right? Um, but I saw, and even the fact that it's still on paper, which some would say would make it not a painting, you know, but I remember I saw this Art 21, that must have been back in like 2012, and it was Glenn Ligon, and he was talking about using paints and stencils. When I think about it, actually prior to that, then I was also doing some works that were in text, right? Like I had this one, I'm not sure, I don't think I have it in this slide, I'm not sure. Well, I had this one sort of wall text painting, maybe I could find it. I had this wall text painting that you know, was very much, it was using, again, like memoir, but it was actually the handwriting of Ibrahim Ibn Sori, you know, and he left these sort of documents. He was being freed when, well, not just he was free at that point, you know, and he was like campaigning to free his family. This is back in like the early 1800s, right? And so I was tracing over like his text, and I was using a silk screen. It's so weird when I think about it. Sometimes like the way I use materials, I was silk screening onto a wall, and then I was tracing over that text with ink.
Acetate? Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Now I used acetate later on in life, right? But
because I think I remember this. You're doing that at Row House.
What, you talking about something with acetate?
I thought you did the thing with when you traced the handwriting. Not at your installation. I think you did it at another time that you did something at Row House.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I'm sure I've done other pieces where I traced handwriting. I have done other pieces like that, like the one I mentioned of Malcolm X with his text from his journal, from his Hajj journal. That one was a tracing handwriting. You know, but there was kind of like yeah. And so when it comes to, wait, what was it? I'm trying to remember. I lost my train of thought for a moment. Why did I go off into that?
You're talking about Ibrahim's story. We were talking, the material, like working with paint.
Yeah.
And then I think you went.
Yes, I was starting to say like, so because we were talking about formalities, and and you said you don't really get into like the specificity of like a formality, right? And I was saying that like I realized that I actually do, and because I think there is something that I super really love about like formal work. Like I love work, like I love Donald Judd's work, for example, right? And I love Saul's work as well. Like I think because there's something about it that is so like, I was gonna say petty, but there's something about it that's so petty to some extent. Like to be so obsessed about these things, you know? Like, and I think because like I feel like for me in art, that's like the only time when I'm like so specific, you know, like
That's interesting. Yeah. No, I think I'm specific too, and maybe I should change it because I guess I just don't think about color.
oh, color is like the last thing for me. Color, but
I
don't
don't think about color.
like the final frontier. It's like color is the final. But you know, when I was in Galveston, then I used color. I did a couple of things that were in color. Those pieces that were on acetate, if I could find them. The pieces that were on acetate, there were these drawings, and there were 7 of them. It also had to do with Hajj, with the Hajj. I feel like I should just get onto my, see if I could get onto my website real quick. No, color is a bit
This is a
daunting.
yeah. I don't know if I'm afraid of it. I mean I don't. Maybe I just don't use a wide range of color.
Um,
Maybe I find it unnecessary to use a wide range of color.
I hear you. I hear you. I would just be like, ooh, because then it's like color. What color? You know, it's like what colors? You know. I think one of the. Let me see if I can get that.
I think going to Penn too though, like so I was talking to somebody the other day and they were saying like in their master's program, like, they don't really have disciplines within their master's program, right? And Penn wasn't really like that too much. I mean, but even though of other people were fairly murky in regards to their disciplines, like you had combined media, right, which is sculpture, which is what I was under. You definitely had painters there,
right.
and you had people who were like who were diehard painters, and I think like that was such a part. We had to do critiques with them as well, and like that was such a part of our our understanding is that I maybe have a block when it gets to that, and yeah, I don't know, but I'm trying to figure it out honestly, the issue with color and how I want to approach it, but
I
but I think they're even more so. Just like for instance, like this work right here, like this work can be talked about strictly through a formal lens, but will you, with your kind of experience and your identity, will you be allowed for that to happen?
yeah. Do you see this one with color? All these
Yeah.
colors. Do you see my?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one that I did in Galveston. That was like, it has to do with the pilgrimage. And it was kind of me thinking about, Donald Judd, his stacked works, but they're not stacked. They're like stacked almost like right next to each other, right? But wanting like this sort of experience of going, but of course for me, it's never just about something formal, right? Because it's like this one, at the time I was looking at this book, it's not the same time when I did the other, I started the text painting series. This book, it's by one of the Chisti Sufi sheikhs, right? And his book called The Book of Sufi Healing, right? And in the book, he starts to go through talking about the different maqam, the different states, spiritual states. He associates them with planets and he associates them with colors, right? And
Oh, okay.
colors and the planets, I started to think about that, and like this one is also having to do with the head. You might remember that one. But sort of thinking about that in regards to for this one I was referencing the planets that they have in sort of like the classical planets. And I realized that a lot of times we would think that, people back then, they didn't understand that there were, only this certain number of planets, almost like, they didn't understand they were, what's up, Will? Going to that? Okay, the certain number of planets and the way how they ordered them, but I realized that people were, in a sense, they were talking about the planets from the view. Oh, please. No, Daddy. They were talking about the planets from the view of being on Earth, you know, from like where you were, not just from like being like out of space, from like something else is being your center, like you are the center. You're in the, and it's not that you're the center, but it's from your vantage point, you know?
Right.
That was another one that did having to do with the Hajj. But some of these forms, they started to reoccur. And I guess when we go to the others, this is the one with from Malcolm X's, if you see that, the text on there, Malcolm X's, journal. Yeah, one after that. The bigger, this is all of them together again, like more like the stacks. Oh, you so probably the stacks. The stack works, you know, because I feel like
what is the mark?
Yes, the marks. This is actually very similar to the other. Let's see, very similarly to the text pieces in regards to the running, like the moving back and forth, you know. So I just sort of I had this point in my head.
Oh, I see.
Started thinking about I was thinking a lot about the that sort of thing of movement. How do you sort of convey movement? Like, okay, so performance and movement and like this ritual, right? So of course, again, the person is starting on the left. So I was like making the brush start on the left, you know, my left, and then move to the right. And then I was using, like, I dipped the ink in the brush in the ink just once, and then sort of use it until it exhausted out the ink, you know? So going from one side to
it's a nice piece.
Hajjar. Yeah, it's the one where he says, Malcolm X, you know, where Hajjar's feet tread thousands of years earlier. So that's a close up.
So this is a detail of that.
Yeah, this is a detail of that.
This is a detail. Okay.
This is all of them. And so I just sort of
I want to ask you about those too.
Yeah. This is you know, so when we talk about the thing of like formality, it's very much in my process. I get so interested. I'm trying to think, where do I actually start? I think I always start with something that has to do with reality, for lack of a better word.
Okay.
Reality, you know? So like, okay. So like, I realized, and you know, I guess like after a while of making work for a while, you know, which I guess both of us have been making work for a while, then you realize, of course, you have these tendencies. Like, I like memoirs a lot. You know, I like somebody a lot. I like.
You said memoirs. What was the second thing?
Journals, which are kind of like memoirs, right? And just something that has to do with like a sort of a human perspective. Like it's it's a vantage point that's that like almost I can channel my vantage point through, right? So, and honestly, when I look at it, like I've been writing in journals and keeping journals since I was like 5-6 years old. Like I still have journals, you know, I still like writing a journal like every day, you know? And so it's I don't know who told me to do that. I probably in elementary school, you know, and I just took it real serious and I do it. So that's sort of, I know, so that always kind of becomes like really important to me. And then it just becomes, it's like something I'm trying to understand. And then it becomes like the work evolves from me wanting to, how do I put it, sort of ground like there's some research part, right? And then me wanting to sort of ground myself in like relationship to that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's like the formality, right? Because that's the only, how can I put, almost in a sense, I almost want to say that's the only way I could really understand it. But like, if I really like, it's almost like, it's almost like when I'm trying to plan something out, then like a larger project or something I want to do, it's like I can grasp it if I can take like pieces of it, just like pieces of it. So it's kind of, I think that's where some of the formality comes into, because that allows me to, that allows me to organize the information. Yes, that would be it. Yeah, it allows me to organize the information.
I think that's, I mean, I would probably say I start from a similar point.
Yeah.
I've been using these FBI memorandums for like what, about 13 years now, kind of going back and forth from those. I think it has to, at least my handling of it, I think it, my taking these materials and either running them through my fingers, like how by running through my fingers, I mean like doing something with it, yeah, physically, or doing something with it, making some kind of a leap within my imagination with this material, with original, kind of content, helps me to digest it and understand it another way. Yeah.
I feel, do you feel like for yourself, like when you think about, well, two questions, right? And I think it's something I'm thinking about too. Like, what was like the first thing that you like in your art making sort of like trajectory, like as an artist, like the first, I was gonna say your first art project, like your first art project that you really think was a project, where like what,
Yeah, no,
like you're trying to figure out back then, or do you approach art as like you're trying to figure something out? And then like, what are you trying to, is there something you're trying to figure out right now with your art?
Yeah, there's something I'm trying to figure out right now with my art. Do I approach it as a problem? Usually, like I think I'm trying to get to like the perfect balance for myself of whatever the inspiration might be. Right? Like the perfect balance in terms of material, in terms of how I handled it, in terms of the size of it, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's a set of problems that, yeah, I'm trying to figure out. The other thing with that is, right now, what am I trying to figure out? I'm trying to, so I, during the quarantine thing, I started listening to Dr. Sherman Jackson's class on Islam in Black America. I think it's called Black America. I forget the title of it. It's on the Beyond. It's on that Beyond Islam in Black America. I think that's the name of it. And within that, like he introduces the concept of Black religion, right? And Black religion as a thing which is very tied to the political desires of Black people, right? And it is not something that is confined to a particular faith, right? It's kind of a way that Black Americans have used different religions, right? Yeah. So I'm trying to understand that, and I'm trying to take that idea and run it through all this other work that I had done, with the Black Panther Party or with Malcolm X, which is much easier. But like just thinking about the whole history of it, the kind of how resistance surfaces in my work, kind of now running that through the lens of Black religion, right? Because on some level, from after seeing all of these things that happened this summer, I think like that's the missing link, right? In terms of really being able to benefit from these things again, like benefit from that kind of sentiment and that kind of activism again. I think it needs a spiritual realm.
Ooh, that's real.
Yeah.
Of that. That's, you know, my husband was saying the same thing. I think he finished reading like Between the World and Me, Ta-Nehisi Coates is saying similar things, that he felt like there was like this sort of void there, you know, of talking about, and I think that's part of the void in a sense of some of the activist movements right now.
Definitely.
It's the same thing because in the past we've always had, it seemed to me that like movements within the Black community were led by religious people. You
That's
know,
right, yeah.
whether they were, you know, Muslim or Christian. I don't know about, you know, Jews, but then I don't. But then I want to say, I don't know, what were the Black Panther Party? You know, like, well, many of them did become Muslim, but they don't seem.
Many, especially on the East Coast.
Yeah, but they don't necessarily seem like they made religious leadership within their group like a priority, unless we want to say that they were very, very much inspired by Malcolm X, which, you know, they seem to be.
They were, but they were also inspired by Marx, and so I think there's a whole level of, you know, trying to get rid of kind of spiritual sentiments within the Black Panther Party.
Yeah, and you kind of it kind of feels like if you don't. It's an interesting thing. It kind of feels to me like if you don't include religion or spirituality, it's going to be kind of, it won't be a big statement to you though, but I don't think you could really make people's lives better with it. Like, you know, the next thing is kind of like, you know, like how we talk about the greater jihad, you know,
the greater jihad, right?
Which, you know, because other people might say this, but this is not fighting the outside war; it's fighting the inside battle within yourself. How you?
What time is it there?
I don't even know. Let me see. Well, let me check.
How many?
It's 9:53 here.
Oh, okay, not too bad. So,
Good though. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing I'm trying to figure out. Also, I'm thinking about, again, from the Africa in the Quran class.
Mm-hmm.
One of these things that gets brought up is that there is a linkage between the experience of the children of Israel in Black America, like in terms of being in bondage and like their treatment within Egypt. And I'm thinking, and that's something I'm thinking about also, like right now, because I feel like if, you know, and I talk about with some of my friends about this a lot, like if Black Americans or Blacks in America are to, or even Africans American, like if we're to play a part in the transformation of this country, it's essentially going to be a miracle.
It's going to be what? A miracle, you said?
A miracle, yeah.
That we play a role in the transformation of the country.
That we're successful in it. I mean, we've already played a role in the transformation of it, but if we are successful in it, I mean, I think it'll just about be a miracle, yeah. Because of the adversity that we're facing and the adversity on so many levels.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, that's interesting. I'm trying to think through that. Like, what exactly is meant by that, or do you mean as if you're questioning whether or not we really have much agency to make an impact, to make like a change in like the of the nation or of our community as Black people?
I want to say like our state is such now that it'll be very difficult for us to make all the strides that we need to make in order to to help to push this country in a better direction, right?
Yeah.
And for us to get even to that point, it would, you know, familial issues, you got issues with economics, you got issues with health, you got issues with education. It's just so many different obstacles that we're facing. It's like, that's stuff I'm trying to think. But it did happen for the children of Israel, right? And so if it did happen for because it happened via a miracle, right? And so that's why that's kind of why I'm saying, like, if it's to happen for us here, it will take a similar, something on that level.
I hear what you're saying. Wow. You know, yeah. I was listening to, I want to, the question I asked you, kind of, you know, I was thinking about this for myself. I was listening to, well, I stumbled upon this woman on Instagram. You mentioned about Instagram. I stumbled upon this woman on Instagram, and she was basically pointing to, you know, like the sort of course, the hurt that a lot of Black folks, or a lot of us, are feeling, especially like a week, 2 weeks ago, regarding what happened with Breonna Taylor. You know, that there's nothing, you know, that really seemed like a semblance of justice, you know, in regards to her case. And she was like, you know, we have, she's like, you know, we're gonna be all right, you know. She was like, a friend of hers, you know, had like texted her or called her. This woman, she's a professor. I can't remember her name right now. She's a professor at a HBCU, and she was like, a friend of hers had texted her something, and she was like, you know, this country is not safe for us, you know. And then she like texted her friend back and was like, this country was never safe for us. Like, what are you talking about? You know, like, this country was never safe for us. It was meant to be safe for us, you know. And she was like, you know, we're gonna have to like go inward, you know. And she was like, and we have allies, you know. And then she pointed out, and she was like, you know, look at the trees, look at the sky. Do you think that like this is just it for us, you know? And she was like, you know, why do you? She's like, there's all these fires burning, and you know, and all these, you know, different parts of the U.S. And she was kind of talking about like the sort of natural, you know, catastrophes that are happening in the U.S. And she was like, you know, we have allies. Basically, she was kind of saying we all have to go within ourselves spiritually, and we also have allies in the spirit world, you know?
Interesting. Yeah.
I had actually reached out to her because what she said, she was just kind of like had this very like calm, you know, perspective, you know. And I think she mentioned, you know, it's kind of having to looking to our ancestors, you know. I think she actually is more kind of into the like the Yoruba type stuff, you know. But I think it also made me think of like what I didn't used to understand for myself. And I know you're interested in archiving and history in your work as well, you know. But I didn't really understand when people, and sort of like, I don't know if it's called Black religious tradition, but like maybe kind of, we'll talk about like ancestors, right? And I'm not sure exactly what like,
I won't be able to make it.
I'm not sure exactly what and I'm not sure what people ancestor worship really is, you know. But when I thought about it, I was just like, what does it mean to sort of like look back at your ancestors, you know? What does it mean to like sort of seek out answers from your ancestors? And then I was like, you know what, I think maybe at least for myself, in a sort of simple way, and we'll wrap up within the next few minutes. My kids are like hanging out, but is like just to look at history and look at what people were doing, like look at what people did to sort of get through things, to sort of like to sort of attack like similar problems, to even if and I don't know, you know, I almost want to say even if they weren't successful in an outward sense, right? But then I want to say, what does it ever really mean to be successful at something in like an outward sense? Because like there's always, they say like new levels, new devils. And it's like, and I think it's something that we, I think maybe Black people are more kind of keen to the reality that like there is like a constant struggle, And I think when when the stuff started off of like, with like Black Lives Matter, which, really kind of originated with like Trayvon Martin, when that hashtag started and when, people started to, that was what, 2012? And for honestly, to be really honest, many Black folks were actually shocked. Many of us were actually shocked. There was something that when we felt really nice and kind of comfortable to a certain extent, like in the first 4 years of Obama, right? There was something that we kind of, not that we forgot, but I would say definitely, like I have younger sisters and they kind of were in a different generation than me, but I would say for them, I had to explain to them why certain things mattered, like regards to race, like regards to, we weren't necessarily using the word being woke, but like even a 7-year difference, close the door, go to daddy. But even like a couple of years of difference in age between me and my sisters, we learned radically different things, like at school, we learned when I was in elementary school, like you gotta do this and you gotta do that and learn this because like your ancestors, they couldn't vote. Your ancestors, they were always talking about your ancestors. Your ancestors, they couldn't, daddy? They couldn't, they couldn't read. So like you have to study and you have to work hard at school. Yes, good night. Okay. You have to work hard at school and what have you, whereas they didn't get that same kind of rhetoric when they were going to school. And it was just nice, sweetie. There's just like a few years of difference, between us. So I think like this idea that, but then I think there was some sort of shock when the Trayvon Martin stuff, happened and everything just kind of like happened after that. But there's also social media. So when I think about like some of the work that like the early work that I was like trying to figure my first project, and I think that I would say like was back in like 2007. So it was this project, the Bill Turns project. I'm pretty sure you saw, which is something I've been thinking about a lot again lately. I don't know. It has to do with like Black women who converted to Islam prior to 1955, and kind of they were in a very sort of similar like political, a lot of political turmoil back in the 60s and 70s and even 50s. But within that, people also were looking, while still fighting civil rights, the civil rights movement, while still fighting for, very real things, lynching, very real things like segregation, all the things that were like systematically on the books, oppressing Black people. They still were thinking about themselves as very independent in regards to their spirituality, in regards to their the way how they present themselves, in regards to like being able to be part of a community, but then also like that your religion is something that is meant to like transform you, that transform sort of creates this sort of, I don't know, this sort of new, I don't want to say just new, but like it allows you like that, it can, at least Islam, it can allow you to see yourself as having like new powers. That sounds amazing, but kind of like, so that was back then, and I'm still sort of thinking about this project. I want to do different things with the project. Now,
I mean, I do think that's across the, thinking about Black religion. I do think that's across different faiths. Because so when I was younger, I used to go to this church, which was called Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. And on the lectern, you know, where the preacher would give, I guess that's what they call it in church, but like the way he would give the sermon, he had two little dump trucks on there.
Okay.
And the reason why he had two little dump trucks on there is that he, you know, before he became a minister, um, he worked on these dump trucks, and he was like gambling and doing all this kind of stuff at the time, and like he essentially received his calling on the dump truck. You know, going back to that, what you're saying about inspiration, like he received his calling to the ministry on that dump truck. So he had this transformative moment on that truck. And so I do think it happens between, you know, other faiths, but I'm thinking especially like when you know what the nation was able to do with many of the people, you know, prisoners,
Hmm. But
you know, and kind of totally, no, and totally, you know, kind of changed their lives. And, you know, Malcolm is one of the most popular examples of that.
but you
But
know,
yeah, I mean,
people only talk about prison in regard to the men. Like there's no stories about women who's been transformed.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Like, and I did this project as a church. I didn't get one prison story.
Really? Maybe you got to go out and find those.
Well, but I'm just saying that is a characteristic more so, especially let's say at that time, of men becoming
Well, now too, though, right?
well,
Well, maybe more. Maybe it's just more women are in the system.
but then a lot of the women who I interviewed in the project, they weren't even in the nation. Like this sister here, Habiba, she was not in the nation. You know, she was not.
Okay.
She, you know, this sister, she had passed away. She was not in the nation. So then it kind of brings this other kind of thing in that it's like, you know, Islam wasn't just like, I guess like a sort of political clean you up rehabilitation center type of, you know, religion, which I think Islam is often sort of presented as
Right.
for the Black community, but it was also people wanting to actually figure out their relationship to a creator in a way that like really made sense to them. And that also was very clear. And when we talk about the thing of formality, I think that's one of the very specific things about Islam. Islam is full of formalities. Like things are very specific. Like it's not just pray, it's pray 5 times a day. It's pray like this, you know?
Right.
It's on these times a day, and this pray, you know, and it's not just fast, you know, but it's like fast on these days at this time from this time to this time, you know, like very specific, right? And I think that, you know, and it's very clear, you know, there's not like any sort of images of a god. And so it really, I think it makes people have to be abstract in a sense, but then also very much sort of rooted in like the reality of everything that's real, you know, like you have to know what time the sun rises. You have to know what time.
Yeah.
It's not,
It does expand your cosmological reach, definitely.
know all these things. And just to sort of, I want to show you what that's just kind of like our last thing, like one of the projects that I started last year. It kind of
before you let me ask you something right quick. Just before I forget, did you ever hear that Wahdi Muhammad went on a kind of he had, I don't, what's the word for it? Basically, he had a program that he was trying to get. Did you ever hear about this?
I'm sorry, you froze. You said he was trying to get what?
Images of Jesus removed from American churches.
Oh, I never. No, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, that's some of that Dr. Jackson talks about in that Islam in Black America. Yeah, he was just talking about because of the amount of work that does to establish white supremacy, right? Like,
yeah, But
The
then
amount of work it does in wax, yeah, yeah, that's what he was trying to do. I thought it was, I had never heard about that either. I thought it was amazing.
love about Imam Wardi Muhammad, and honestly, I grew up going to two masjids. One that was, previously a Nation of Islam mosque, and then, and Imam Wardi Muhammad became the leader. It became under his leadership, and they still consider him to be like the leader, right? Even though, yes, he's been gone for 12 years. So they're definitely part, the Masjid of the Musa Khalifa, that this community definitely feels totally like aligned with his teachings, right? And then there's also another mosque that was just a few blocks away, Masjid of Taqa, which you visited. I think you actually visited with that Imam Siraj. He was, a minister in the nation, and then he was their first imam once they were, the nation under Imam Wardi Muhammad. So not like the nation, Farrakhan nation, but, evolved, right? And so nonetheless, Imam Wardi Muhammad, back when I was doing, the As the Veil Turns project, there was a lot of stuff that I was researching, of course. And, I remember, man, one of the beautiful things that he was saying is like, kind of having people go through in their mind about this thing about having like a white man as God, right? And then going through, okay, what if we have a black man as God, right? Which is kind of what the nation did, right? But then it goes, oh, it's not, there's no man as God, right? Because you can't just like replace like God as a white man with God as a black man, and then you will feel powerful. Because honestly, when you think about that, at least when I think about that, I don't think any of us really think that any other human being is that powerful to that extent. You know what I'm saying? Like to that extent, to just replace one human being, with the other one, because then it's that's your God, and that's not your neighbor's God. You know what I'm saying? Like, what is that? He's going so I know that's like, but that is how polytheism works in a sense.
That is, yeah.
My God versus your God. So then who's really God? Who's God really then, right? Is God all powerful, or he's just like, local, he's localized. Okay, whatever, right? And localized, but I started to like over the last summer, I started to, and this kind of piggybacks again about that thing of, well, and actually when I think about the As the Veil Turns project, I think there is something very, something that opens up a lot differently in talking about like Islam and Blackness in the Black community when you start to talk about women. That doesn't really happen in the same way when you're talking about men, right? Because they hold a dominant narrative about like why people become Muslim, why Black people become Muslim. That just doesn't really work for women, in the same kind of way. At least from my experience, it doesn't work in the same kind of way. When you start to talk to women, then you start to hear more about people wanting to change like things for their family, and people wanting, and maybe, there's a lot of things that like the woman wasn't necessarily, I'm gonna think about Sister Habib, but this was a woman in my community. It wasn't that she was like all, sort of like strung. There's kind of like some of the narratives, like it's some guy who was like strung out, or who was a criminal, like some of the Malcolm X narrative. He was a criminal, and he was this and that, and then, Elijah said, clean yourself up. And then, Islam, real rehabilitation center, Islam, which is beautiful and wonderful and what have you, right? But it's just not really the story for like women, women are more like, they almost like if they approach things more I don't want to say just cerebrally but thoughtfully in a sense, but like because like it hits them in sort of like their brain and in their heart, right? So maybe they just feel like they never really believed that like they always maybe had this thing where they didn't really believe that a man could be God, right? And then they they learned about Islam, and then it opened things up to them. It seemed more like a thing of like learning and acquiring knowledge, which, and of course they were making big like lifestyle choices of how they were going to dress differently, how you're going to eat differently, like all of the things that Islam just sort of changes in a person's life, and it's really fascinating, like these days with like Corona, things that have, everything that's happened with Corona, one of the big things that people have been talking about, especially if you follow like this sort of personal development, conversations and higher consciousness conversations, which I'm a fan of, then, they talk so much about rituals, finding your purpose, rituals. Why? Because everybody's lost their rituals, right? But
because they've been thrown off of their routine.
Yeah, because what were people's rituals? People's rituals were getting up in the morning, making their coffee, going to work. That was their ritual, But what if like all of that is gone and you don't have those sorts of things? But now we're talking about, okay, but people, and I, this really beautiful book that I read / listened to with this man. He was talking about, it's called The Productive Muslim. And he was talking about how he was somewhere and they had like a tsunami or, some sort of like natural disaster. And the relief that he felt when he heard the adhan from the masjid, but then that was happening, there was still the adhan that was being called 5 times a day, and how that just helps people, like that allows a person to like, it don't matter, there's like earthquakes, there's all this kind of stuff, and then like, but it's time to pray, right? It's time to pray. And so, I mean, granted, the mosques were closed a lot, and even here, I remember the day, even just a couple of weeks ago, it was like a month ago, when where we live, there's literally a mosque on the corner, from where we live. I can hear them doing the entire prayer. That's how close.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Fatiha, everything. And so I remember the day when they started. They had been calling the adhan, but they weren't calling the iqamah. Like they weren't calling people to come to the masjid. But then they started to come to the masjid again, and it was like, oh wow, there's, but these things that like, for somebody beyond like the socio, like political things, which are important, but having like rituals that, people even say about art is sort of being something that takes you out of time, like takes you out of time for that moment. But when you're making your art, but even the things of like the daily prayers, taking people out of time to do something that just has nothing to do with like, it has to do with everything that's going on, but it's like, it's going to happen no matter what else is going on,
Yeah. It's not part of the grind.
Not part of the grind. And
yeah.
This project, I'll show you this very last one, which is kind of what I was and was starting to work on.
What was this? Oh, is this in Life magazine?
Is it? No. This is actually from Ebony magazine.
Oh, that's what I meant. Ebony. Is this the one about the jazz musicians?
Yes. Yeah. So I started.
Oh, okay.
I guess this does relate back to the Asbel Turns project in regards to these folks. They were not Nation of Islam folks. They were Philadelphia. And actually, when I think about it, it relates so much to me being in Egypt too. Like, like they're dressed in sort of like this Arab regalia. They actually identified themselves as being Arab. And so I've been trying to figure out like what exactly they mean by that when they would say that, right? This is Lynn Hope was a Black jazz musician.
Yeah, Elmo Lynn Hope. Yeah.
Yeah, and his congregation in Philadelphia. And I started to almost in a sense that similar type of thing. Them sort of like the way they dealt with like racism, and this is what this article, if you might have read it, you know, they're talking about they go and this was like a thing for jazz musicians, right? Especially jazz, you like Dizzy Gillespie's book, To Be or Not to Bop, he talks about it, how the Black jazz musicians, they would walk into a restaurant or whatever, segregated, they would come in there and they'd be like, no, we don't serve Negroes or whatever. They use the epithet probably, you know, and then you'd be like, oh, I'm not a Negro, I'm Muslim, right? It's like, I'm
right.
And then they'd be like, oh, yeah. It's almost as if they were like, confusion. You know, like,
yeah, they cannot compute.
That
is crazy though. I mean, because you know, you've heard that same thing happening for people who had on turbans.
Well, this is part of it, yeah.
Yeah.
They were like, but then it sort of throws in like this aspect of that I started to realize, even aside from like the religious part, like being that my family's from the Caribbean, and I would hear stories from older Caribbean people who came to the United States back in like the 30s or when there was segregation and what have you. And they're dark skinned, very Black, not some obscure, I don't know what race you are type of Black people, and they would go somewhere and the person would be like, oh, we don't serve your kind, Black people, Negro, whatever they call them. And they'd be like, kind of like, I don't know what you're talking, not exactly say, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's like, I'm not a Negro, excuse me,
Yeah.
Like, they'd be like, oh, yeah, and then you realize I realized this a long time ago. I was like, I think this part of the thing, and I'm not saying that this is like 100%, but part of the thing of like the racism and the sort of discrimination has to do with history. It's not just about color. And I think it's one of the things that people, in my opinion, like really, unfortunately, some Black people even internalize. When people start to internalize racism, like to think that like the reason why people are treating you badly is because of your color. And then they think that's the way how it's going to be all over the world, as if your color is actually bad. Like there's nothing bad about your color, right? There's nothing. Yeah. Color is just your color. And if you actually think, and even me, like living, outside of the United States and having traveled, like, different places outside the United States, even now I'll go back to the States and people who are interested in traveling or whatever, and Black folks, and they'll ask me about racism. And and it's not like it's not a stupid question or anything like that, even I had one friend here who's white, who's European, not you, Rahma, if you're watching, but another friend who was white, and she asked me about if I get treated like, bad or like whatever because of race, like racism, whatever. And I was like, no, do you? I love it. I love it. And I said, no, do you? Do you? Right? Because why? I'm not saying, and I understand where she was coming from. I know where people are coming from when they say that. But in a sense, it's like, why would you expect that I would be treated bad because I'm dark skinned, because I'm Black, and that you wouldn't be treated bad because you're white? If it's not a thing of like, there are cultural things of history and what have you, but I just want to make sure that that my color is not default problem. Like, don't
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think there is some sort of demonstration of that too when you look at the way how non-black people, non-African American people, meaning non-descendants of former slaves on cotton fields, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about even descendants of former slaves on sugarcane fields, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, like we just say, some of them they cut sugarcane, didn't pick cotton, they cut sugar, and like, or even Africans, right, who were coming to the U.S. at a certain point in time, the way how they were treated, it's like there's something to do with history. I think some of it has to do with people wanting to keep their own, like, former slaves, if they would think about that, keeping them in line, and being very, like,
I think it's very much a part of that.
yeah, being intent on that. And then religion plays a thing in that too, because you're like, okay, so these guys all of a sudden, you put on a fez and you put on, because Lynn Hope would go a little further. He'd be like, I'm not a Negro, I'm a Muslim, my people are, my religion is from, the East, or whatever kind of stuff he said, right? But he would assert to them a couple things, right? That he doesn't follow their religion, which I think is an interesting thing to be like, I don't follow your religion. I don't follow your rules, right? I don't follow your rules. So, like, and I think that, and it's not, I don't shade Christians or anything like that, it's not just about, like, but there is something there, there is something there. And then all of a sudden, how come all of a sudden now your head, before you saw a Black person, now what do you see? It's just bizarre, it's like, because his color didn't change. Like, his color did not change. His accent probably didn't change either. He was from the South, like,
Mm-hmm.
but all of
but the concept of the historical frame that he sat in potentially, changed. I wanted to show you this. Can I show you this one piece? Because you brought up these jazz musicians, and I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this piece before.
do you have permission to share?
Let's see. Can I share?
Did you want to share something on the screen?
Yeah, I want to share something on the screen with you.
Try and share, see what happens. Maybe.
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Okay, let me change that. New share, advanced, continent. Oh.
I think you have to make me a host.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. I think you should. Yeah.
Okay. All right. This will stop other screen sharing. Yes. Okay. So this is a piece that I did. It's called Remembrance for H. Freeman, and I don't know if you read this thing by Sylvia and Joe. It was a piece about blues music, right? And basically, it was giving. Yeah, right. And the reason why she said that this is possibly so is because many of the people who played string instruments in West Africa were coming from Afro-Islamic cultures, right? And so when they came over into, they came, they went through the diaspora, when they got to America in particular, string instruments are also one of the few instruments that were allowed to continue being in use. Because you remember that the drum is outlawed for several different reasons, but the string instruments were allowed. plantation owners also got to make money off these people. If you think about 12 years a slave, right? They would lease them out. They would go play at other plantations for money. But the people who were able to play these instruments, who had some kind of facility already potentially with these instruments, were able to leave a big mark on the music, right? Tonally and all of this kind of stuff. So it's a really interesting piece. But it led me to what I had been hearing for a while, since like the early, let's say like the mid 90s, is that John Coltrane's album "A Love Supreme" was originally supposed to be entitled "Allah Supreme."
Yes.
Did you ever hear this?
I heard that from
Yes. Now,
mm-hmm.
You heard that from who?
From Terry. I think I love.
Who did you hear it from?
Terry Adkins.
Terry told you that?
Yeah, he also told me to get the writing. I actually have the notes from his maybe you have it too, from his like
from
his
the liner notes.
Yeah, like his handwritten.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like a
yeah, the diagram that yeah.
He said Terry was like, you should talk just like a Muslim.
It's basically Shariat class on the liner notes that he's writing, that Coltrane's writing. But he's also in Philadelphia at this time.
Yeah.
Like around the time that he starts to put together A Love Supreme, he's in Philadelphia. He was married at the time to a Muslim woman. McCoy Tyner had already taken his Shahada. So there were key people in his life who he could have gotten, Islamic influences from also. If you also think about formally, the chant within the main part of the beginning part of this album, it's a dhikr, pretty essentially. I know other faith traditions, practice this, but these are a lot of kind of coincidences that are coming in to contact with each other. So, what I did instead was, I took out the text and had it redone in Arabic, in this kind of Arabic font, which was similar to the original typeface for Love Supreme. So Yahya Kultrain, Allahu Akbar, right? And kind of made it, so these are also kind of some of the lines I'm trying you asked me what is some of the problems I was trying to solve in my work right now. Like, I think this is also kind of one of them, is like, how do we increase, people's awareness of the Islamic contributions within Black American culture, within, American culture in general, right? Because if you talk about the blues, essentially you're talking about jazz, you're talking about rock and roll, you're talking about American music, period. So if what she's saying is correct, that there's a lot of impact there. But
yeah. So did you do any, like, if you have this one piece, did you do any more sort of pieces like related, I don't know, so sort of like.
This is the first one. Because, and there are others, like allegedly Charlie Parker took his Shahada. There are other features. So I'm thinking about doing a small series of album covers with all Arabic text. And this is pretty large. This is like, I think these are 4x4.
Mm-hmm.
So they're pretty big. They prop up on the side of a wall. And this one has this kind of neon light halo in the back of it.
So this is so okay, because I remember now, probably the first work I've known of yours was like maybe work you did, maybe it's like 2006 or something. And you were doing album covers, and you had this sort of like imagined story of, the series you did. I'm sure it's your work. The series.
Yeah, the Pride Records. Yeah, Pride Records series. Yeah.
So how do you have like a story of how you imagine this like having function? Do you make up stories like that?
No.
for this.
Well, I kind of had to. The funny thing is, all of this is with the John Coltrane thing. It's kind of apocryphal, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, it may not be actual. I'm just kind of like showing that, there's a lot of evidence in the background that may lead to that the story is true.
Mm.
But the leap that I think that I kind of made was just to do an Arabic version of this album cover, and it also for me is like it connects. It starts to give another value or kind of a different circulation of Black American culture, right? We don't often realize how global it is, you know.
Because that's where my mind goes with this. My mind starts to go like,
Okay.
oh, is this the album cover? Will you imagine that this was actually the way the album was circulated in the Middle East, for instance? You
In
know,
the Middle East, yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
probably know this from traveling. I know, like, way back when I was like an undergrad at Howard, then I did like a study abroad, and I realized that they changed the names of movies once they travel to different countries. So a name of like a Miyazaki movie, that I saw in France, that maybe in English it's called, you know, a girl, a girl from afar. In France, it's called Spirit.
Uh-huh.
Like the French translation for the Japanese film is Spirited Away in French. The American translation,
Uh-huh.
they changed the names of different projects, of different films, as they travel throughout the world to kind of deal with the different sensibilities of people around
Hmm.
the world.
Hmm.
So I don't know. That's where my mind was like, oh man. So
That's interesting. That's interesting.
when this album hit the streets of Egypt, it was called Allahu Akbar. you know?
I might have to. Yeah, I'm gonna think about that. So I might have to use that. Actually, that's pretty good. I like that.
Is your
Because you have Night in Tunisia. You have a lot of other stuff too that could be potentially make these connections. And yeah.
yes, absolutely. Because even when I think about, like, one of the things that also interested me, with Ali Shariati and this his book, the text paintings that I was showing before, is that one of the things he did is that he translated Frantz Fanon's work into Farsi. You know,
Oh wow. Okay. Uh-huh.
we want to talk about the influence of Black culture. Black culture was like, the ideas from Black culture were like freeing everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like it was freeing everybody. It made everybody like think of themselves, differently. Anybody who was like in a sort of like struggle, and people were struggling with different things. Like, it's not just, in a sense, it's not just us. Like, struggle is not unique. It's not unique for Black people, right? Like one group, they have their, whether we were having our civil rights movement, other people having their decolonialization movement.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's kind of like they were struggling against things that, though of course, he talks about this in other books of his. So though they may have had somebody, let's say in Iran, who they look like you, the person looks like you, that's leading your country, but they're not you. Like, they're not you. And how do you know? The education, the way they think, the way they, the way they think, they're just, and so people become so like, it's like this idea he has of people sort of becoming like alienated
Mhm.
themselves even from their culture, etc. So when Frantz Fanon, his work, and that one, particularly, I think that was The Wretched of the Earth. Like, this book, people were reading that book all over the place.
Yeah, that was a very important work at that time.
And and Iran, they made the first Malcolm X stamp. That was one of the other things that, was kind of an interesting thing. They made a stamp with his image on it, and it's kind of
Well, you have.
mm,
Did you get any of those?
you have it, of course. Yeah, yeah,
Huh?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
I have it.
Okay.
So there,
Yeah.
it's kind of like you know, we have, in a sense, these ways that and I guess that is one of the beauties, one of the things that I, you know, think about in my work, is like there's this ways how we, as Black folks, have, of course, we've influenced other people around the world in ways that, like, we oh, well, you're the host now. Let me see. So make me the host back. We sort of influence other people in their cultures in ways that I think a lot of times Black folks, we don't realize. We may think, I think now we'd probably be like, oh, other people, they love our hip hop, like they like our music.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's been happening for, yeah.
Not a small thing, like that's not a small thing, right? This is one of the ways how, like, culture, one of the ways in which culture is spread in very important ways is through music, right? You pointed to, that's not what I wanted to show. Yeah, you pointed to those particular works, for instance, the works of John Coltrane. But I think also, and that's kind of a fascinating thing, there's like these times that but also other, and I guess this is probably part of the thing with me and your work that I think is like really interesting and fascinating. I think is also something that, like, in part because of both of our, like, being Muslims or our relationship to Islam, because I'm not going to say just default somebody being Muslim, but, is that thinking, like, Black folks have not only sort of operated within a dynamic of, oh, I made a mistake and did that. We haven't only, like, operated within a dynamic of being only influenced by white folks, in a sense, like our exposure to culture and our exposure to thinking is not just within, like, a dynamic of whiteness. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
we weren't only there's a couple of things, and I won't go off of this too much. There's like something I've learned is Black folks did not,
About 10 minutes.
we've kept a lot of our culture. We weren't just fully robbed of our culture, right? B, Black folks have always been sort of global, right? And had global sort of influences. And C, so it's kind of, but even on the continent of Africa, so we have an influence. So I love just to think about, like, your project, as your album project, as being something that was like an album that actually traveled around the world.
Yeah.
It needed an Arabic cover. Why? Because he was selling it, like, Jeddah or something. Yeah. And then also, like, that Black folks also had enough of, like, their own autonomy, and we still do have enough of our own autonomy to choose, like, our how we were going to present ourselves, like how we were going to think, how we were going to believe in God, like what kind of rituals we were going to take on, like, out of choice. Like, so we influence, and then we also, and that's not just to say, like, that Islam is like a foreign religion. That's not true either, right? So we, but that there was
I think that
exchange that did have to happen for African Americans too,
Yeah, and I think you're right that has been happening for a long time, and maybe it happens particularly amongst the creatives, of course the musicians, but also the painters, the writers, and Yeah, yeah. We need, we should continue. Hopefully next time I can maybe show you images and get feedback, but we have to, we can't let another, like, what, 5 years go before we.
I know, right? It's crazy, but this was really good. I know you and I could like go on forever, but we will stop here. This is a good stopping point and a great. All right, Jamal. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, alaikum salam rahmatullah.
Family.
Thank you for inviting me.